Boker Tov, good morning, and we are learning today. We're now in the next stage of our crash course in the Jewish lifestyle, and our learning takes us towards the next section, which is Bris. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our series, Suri Stern, and also to wish her a Mazel Tov of becoming a grandmother this last week, and Be'ezrat Hashem. This little one should bring Nechama and Yeshua to Klal Yisrael. Be'ezrat Hashem. It's a special week for baby to be born. 2 yortzites, but now it's also going to be remembered as a time of light sprouting at times of darkness. Be'ezrat Hashem. We look forward to many great things, many wonderful things. What do we have a name yet?
Hallel Rus.
Hallel Rus. Beautiful, really beautiful. Lots of thanksgiving to be given. Be'ezrat Hashem, we look forward to seeing that place marker grow bigger. Be'ezrat Hashem, let us learn Torah together. So on the topic, we've now moved from birth to Shalom Zachar to and Simchas Bas, that Shabbos space, to now the Bris. This shir is much more complicated because, as opposed to the previous two things, where there are scattered halachas all over the show and framework, when it comes to this, there is a significant amount of halacha when it comes to Bris Mila. And there's an area in Shulchan Aruch which is called Hilchos Mila. Right, so Siman Reish Samach to Reish Samach Vav in Shulchan Aruch in Yordea. And when one learns this in Smicha, this is a limud which takes a number of months to go through if you want to do this properly. It takes learning the 19th perek of Meseches Shabbos, Rabbi Eliezer de Mila, which relates to one of the more complicated aspects of Mila, which is Bris Mila on Shabbos. So it's a very significant learning. However, what we're going to do is we're going to do it from the other way around. As opposed to saying, what does the halacha say, and go through it piece by piece, because there's a lot of things which are perhaps beyond our pay grade as pedestrians, so to speak, meaning to say specifics about the knife and specifics about sickness and those kind of things are not what we're going to be focusing on. We're going to do it from the we'll call the consumer end, which is things that we would affect us as we approach this. So the way I try to always work these things is ask questions that people would ask, and then let's use those as access points. So the first question is why do we need to do a bris? And the answer is very simple and very obvious, and that is because the Torah tells us so. The Torah tells us twice about a bris, one as a description and the other one as a commandment. The description about it is found at the end of Parshas. Where's our first bris opportunity? Lech Lecha, at the very end of Lech Lecha, before Avraham Avinu has his name change, Sarai has a name the name change. There's a promise of children. There's a promise of the land of Israel. Then Avraham Avinu is told, "You and your children are going to have a bris milah," and he has a bris milah at the ripe age of 99. The first person who has a bris milah at the age of 8 days old is Yitzchak. The next week parsha, which is Vayera. However, that's not the reason why we keep bris milah, because that became an Abrahamic tradition, but that is not mandated universally for the nation of Israel. Where it is in the beginning of Parshas Tazria, where the second pasuk says, the Torah tells us, "Daber b'nei Yisrael v'odemor, Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zachar, v'tama shivas yamim, ki meish nidas tevasa titma." So when a woman gives birth, then she have a child. The Torah tells us on the 8th day, for a male child, you will circumcise the flesh of his foreskin. That's what the Torah says, and that's the reason why we do it. So that's really the be-all and end-all. However, as we know, that we try to understand why it was that Hashem commanded us as a time, as a taste. This does not mean to say that any reason that is given will now control and therefore regulate how we're going to do it. So we're not going to use the reason as a limitation of the idea, but it will certainly help inform us and enrich the experience. So there are a lot of ideas as to why that is. As an example, one idea is the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch, when counting the mitzvahs, he counts the second mitzvah in the Torah as Bris Mila, because he counts by the parshiyos, and he slots in Bris Mila in Parshas Lech Lecha, which is where Avraham Avinu is told about it. So it's the second mitzvah that he counts in the Torah, where he says, he calls what's called the Shorshei mitzvah, which are the roots. How do you understand this mitzvah? He says, this is the moment of distinction. Why? Because really humanity was supposed to serve God. And there was given a very clear binary option as to how to serve God. You're going to want to do this, but don't do that. I want you to do something else. I don't want you to eat that tree. All other fruit eat, not that fruit. That was a we'll call universal challenge. All of humanity was in the same boat, and all of humanity were two people at that point in time. However, humanity took the alternative route, and therefore entered into a new phase where God was, we'll call it Plan B of reality. And there was something which was lost. Humanity, in a certain sense, lost their ability to fully be chosen or be God's ultimate creation, until somebody decided to prove themselves that they were willing to listen. In fact, just in case you're wondering, the way that Sfas Emes understands it is, what was the prerequisite for Lech Lecha me'artzecha me'woladzecha me'beis avecha? What gave Avram the credence to be the one to hear that? The Sfas Emes says that call was out for all of humanity. Avram Avinu was the only person who listened, meaning there was a aura in the world that God said, I want there to be an immigration to this special land. There was only one person who had the radio set on, and that was Avram Avinu. So he was willing to hear that call, and thereafterwards there were a number of direct mandates that he had to take care of, which was very, very difficult, culminating in ultimately the Akedah was one of the most significant mandates that he had to somehow manage to do, and this was the life that he led. The way that it's understood in spiritual thought is that Avraham Avinu, in a certain sense, reclaimed the uniqueness of what humanity as a whole had at the beginning. So what humanity was supposed to be as a whole was now chosen by a specific person, and that is the same thing with land as well. It used to be that the entire world was the space of God, but what happened is that it lost its uniqueness until when there was a chosen human being, along with that chosen human being came a chosen land. Those two concepts, by the way, today are very hard for everybody else to understand. Right? Everything that's going on right now is, why do you think you're chosen as a people? Why do you think this land is special as a land? Those questions about the uniqueness of Avram and his progeny and the land, as opposed to every other land, are clearly, obviously, on the forefront of the focus of every country now, even though it should really not make a difference. And there are many more people being killed in other places, and there's many other things that are going on concurrently, but apparently everybody seems to notice about this. So Avraham Avinu becomes the chosen one. So in order to facilitate this, it says the Sefer HaChinuch, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to give a demarcation to you that you will be distinct, because you're no longer the rest of the flock. You've now emerged. You've chosen to be part of this destiny. So I'm going to give you a distinguishing mark. So the Bris Mila, therefore, is an expression of chosenness. It's an expression of difference and uniqueness as well. It is interesting that the Bnei Yishmael, that the Arabs do also have this which makes sense, because they are also vying for the chosenness. I mean, they were invented much later on, right, when they copied Judaism and pagan religions in the Arabian Peninsula. But be it as it may, they adopted things which also give them, so to speak, the replacement mark of uniqueness. That's what the Sefer HaChinuch suggests is number one. Another possibility is, another idea as to what the Bris Mila is, a midrash in a very famous midrash, but to me is always a very meaningful midrash, is the Midrash Tanchuma in Parashat Tazria, paragraph Parsha Hey, which describes a conversation which is had between two colleagues, Turnus Rufus which his name was Tinius Rufus, the Roman procurator of the province of Judea, and Rabbi Akiva. This must have occurred at the beginning of the 2nd century of Common Era, where Turnus Rufus asks him a question which says, Eizoi ma'asim na'im, shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu or shel Basar V'dam? So he says, whose actions are better, the human beings or the Almighty? Now, expecting the firm answer, Rabbi Akiva should have said, of course, God Almighty creates wonderful things. But Rabbi Akiva says human beings, so he says, I don't understand. Why don't you say God created this entire universe? It's much more powerful than the human being. The human being can't control the temperature in 4 by 5 feet, and God's got the whole world and universe all in equilibrium. How do you account for that? So Rabbi Akiva says, well, what's better? Is wheat or bread better? So obviously bread is better because it has been processed. So the Turnus Rufus then says, you know what, you're right, what I was asking was specifically this issue. I was about to ask you about Bris Mila, because here you have the perfect human being is born, it's fantastic, and we say God just one little adjustment. I'm going to just sort of fix things up for you here. And so how could you impose, improve, change, adapt the actions of God? The answer is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not create a perfect world, as Rabbi Akiva explains it. He created an almost perfect world. And He is partnering with us, leaving the imperfection for us to complete, for us to take it to the next level, to process, to make it into the next stage of perfection. The first thing we do when it comes to a young male's life is to start the process of saying, this is going to be the rest of your life. It's going to be finding places which require processing and require fixing, and do it. That seems to be the understanding of this. It is worthwhile noting as these things go. Rabbi Akiva seems to win most of these arguments, but ultimately he gets killed by them. So it's, the Romans have different ways of winning arguments, but intellectually and for the rest of all of our history, we know that Rabbi Akiva won this argument, even though they killed him. But there are a number of other machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Taran Rufus, which are worthwhile noting as well. The Gemara in Baba Basra Daf Yud also has a dispute as to why there are poor people in the world, in a very fatalistic way. Taran Rufus says, you see, God must hate poor people because He left them poor. Rabbi Akiva says, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them poor in order for us to help them. Which is the same argument, which is, why is there imperfection in the world? The answer is to do something about it, not to fatalistically blame. That kind of worldview is the Jewish worldview. We don't look at the world as a static, imperfect space, but rather an invitation into to change it. And that's another reason perhaps for Bris Mila.
By the way, is Ms. Geyer ultimately the wife of
very
and she married Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah, so there was so there's a.
It's interesting.
Yeah, so there was an element of a silver lining, but ultimately, unfortunately, they killed Rabbi Akiva, the Romans, so they didn't Torah teaching. But anyways, be it made. A third idea is very fascinating. The Gemara in Menachos, there's many other reasons. I've chosen three to focus on. The Gemara in Menachos stuff. Mem Gimel on Beis tells us a very interesting Gemara where it describes that when David HaMelech went into the Beis HaMerchatz, into the wash house, and he says V'ra Atzma Oimed Arum, and he noticed himself standing naked. He says Oili Kshe'emod Arum B'Loi Mitzvah. He says, I feel naked of any commandments, or any Torah commandments around me. What should I do? After he noticed that he had a Bris Mila, then he was calmed as well. And it says, and he composed a song about it, and that's why it's in Tehillim Yud Beis starts as Lamanasech ala Shminis Mizmor LeDavid. Okay, so the 12th Mizmor in Tehillim is about Bris Mila, and it was after this moment where David HaMelech noticed this. By the way, go back to now Tehillim Yud Beis and see how that relates. Homework for later. So now the strange thing about this Gemara is it seems like a little bit of a obvious biological fact, right? It's not this is not rocket science, David HaMelech, that you suddenly figured out that there's a Bris Mila and therefore you're not alone. And so there's a beautiful comment I came across in the Sefer Tamim Menagim quoting Rav Baruch of Mezhe Bush, who says that what was going on over here whenever the Gemara talks about Beis HaMerchatz or Beis HaKisei, going to the bathroom. It doesn't mean to say going to the bathroom. What it means to saying is going to the emotional, psychological bathroom, which is where you discharge, where you unclothe yourself emotionally, and you do the work necessary to reject the parts to discharge the parts that are not necessary, which are holding you back, which have no nutrients, and to maintain for your health that which is necessary. That's what the process really is. If you read through like Evan Shlem of the Vilna Gaon, very clear that Beis HaMerchatz and Beis HaKisei are a process of self-refinement. That being the case, what was David HaMelech doing? He was unclothing himself of every action. What he was saying to himself is, I'm going to analyze every good action that I do. Is there a place, is there a part in that which is actually altruistic? Am I doing it for the right reasons or not? And when he put, every action that he was doing on the hook, so to speak, and he looked at it, he said, it wasn't for altruism. I'm doing it because I want people to be impressed. I'm doing it because that's what people do. I'm doing it because, after all, kings must do that. I'm doing it because of the accolades. I'm doing it because people need to applaud me. I'm doing it because the picture will be on the front page of the newspaper, or for the photo opportunity. I'm doing all these things for ulterior motives. And David HaMelech found himself naked of all mitzvahs, of all commandments, of all good actions, because he felt that really I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. And then there was only one thing which remained. There was only one action in his life which remained that was altruistic, and that is Bris Mila. And you know why? Because it was done at a stage where he didn't have ulterior motives and biases, because he was 8 days old. And so in a certain sense, what the Gemara is really saying is, is you want to look into life and sort of see where do we have pureness? Is there a possibility of altruism and doing things for the right reason? The answer is yes, but deep down. Right, you have to go much further. And I believe that perhaps that's one of the reasons why we say is perhaps with the same emotional transparency, maybe we should be able to extend that to later on in life. We'll be able to be able to take that with us. So there's just three different reasons that additional to the Torah tells us we have to do it. That's why we're doing it. But additionally, there are roots. The distinctive aspect of it, which is what the Sefer HaChinuch says, the chosenness of Avraham Avinu, and the altruism, the idea of one's mission in life. The Torah's Rufus is a misunderstanding of the fatalism of life, as Rebbe Akiva's understanding of the invitation, and finally the idea of that altruistic point of purity as well, which is given to us by our parents. So then the question becomes, okay, so why only for the boys, right? So now you say, well, that's just physically the fact. The truth is that, but you could ask further. You could sort of, so why did God create it that way, right? So why did God create it biologically that it should be only that one gender has to have a Bris Mila, and then the commandment of the Bris Mila. Not unfortunately, in some terrible cultures, there is female circumcision in Africa. It's not terrible things, but that's not the Jewish way. But there are self-mutilating tribes out in Africa somewhere. But here's the way: why is the Torah only required for males, and why does Hashem facilitate in such a way? Again, very hard to know. Okay, the basic understanding is that's what the Torah says. Right, so the Torah tells us that, but to understand perhaps some of the reasoning, the Rambam tells us in Moreh Nevuchim, in the third section of Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam actually talks about Ta'amei HaMitzvahs, reasons behind the mitzvahs, and he says an interesting observation which adds another reason to the Bris Mila, but also is very much related to this. And he says that in fact the Bris Mila is a way to do. He says Ha'azara me'afsid klei ha'meshagel mikol zachar mibalei ha'chayim. So it is to diminish one's sexual drive as well. It's a reminder that a person should be more careful about the way they conduct their lives. So what is the driving force in life? What drives everything? So you speak to different schools of thought. They'll tell you different things. If you speak to Freud, right? So in it, right? If you think about that, what the Rambam is saying is tone it down. And here's the funny thing. The general people we have to worry about when it comes to this department is less the women, just the way it is, right? It's one does not hear about aggression in this area most of the time, 97% of the time, except from the department of men. And so what the Rambam is saying over here is this is over here to this is a sign for life. Is like Kosh Baruch Hu says, I've wired you a particular way. You're going to have to fix that. You're going to have to control that. You're going to have to figure out that this is the possibility of the greatest creation in the world and also the greatest carnage in the world, as we've seen in the last few weeks as well. So this is part of what it is, and that's why specifically, so to speak, almost a harness on a very dangerous, say, a section, 50% of humanity, which is what's to be understood as well. Another way you could see it in general is that if you go back to the brachas of the Birkas HaShachar, is when it comes to the woman, it's She'asani Kirtzanoi. The woman was created a lot closer to perfection. The man needs a lot more regulating, which is why there are more mitzvahs, which the man has to do to sort of pull them into the space that they need to be, whereas the woman is a lot closer to where the end goal is, as opposed to the man. So fitting all that together, but the Rambam was saying specifically related to bris as well. Then the question becomes, okay, so why the 8th day? I mean, out of all times. So the Rambam says it's important to know that you need to do a Bris Mila, but the Torah is not going to mandate it for adults for a number of reasons. For again, this is the Ta'amei HaMitzvahs. This is not why this is just an understanding of this. They're not going to do it when we're older because it's painful, and also even let's say you do it older as a baby, then it's for the parents it's much more painful experience. Right, to do this. I've been at brisses of 3 months old because of medical necessity. It's much more intense. A baby who's 3 months old can really, really cry, and it's much more painful to see, even in that space of 2 months and 3 weeks. It makes a big difference as well. I mean, I don't understand this whole business of the 13-year-olds in some of the Muslim cultures. It's just unbelievable. That people should do this, but the Rambam says at the earliest time. Why 8 days then? So the Rambam actually says it relates to an idea we've seen in the notion of karbanos, where it says that the Torah tells us shivas yomim tiyeh imimoy, that you can't have a karban before 7 days. There's a certain sense of viability. The child needs to be viable, needs to be strong enough to be able to survive this. And we saw that last week, that the Shabbos might be part of that process of viability, of spiritual strength in order to get there as well. And if you go, that's the Rambam in a more rationalistic perspective. If you want to read the Maharal's work called Ner Mitzvah, which is his essay on Chanukah, so in there he talks about the dimension of 8, and that's where he goes into the notion of 8 being a specific number which is beyond regular nature being six dimensions, x, y, z, axis, 2 directions, and a single point in the center which holds it all together, that being 7, and then 8 is the aura around that. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to 8 as well. Who has the responsibility of doing the bris? This is the funny thing. You see, when the baby is 8 days old, simply the baby does not have the wherewithal to be able to make that request, right? So the responsible party is father. Yeah, well, actually, it really is the mother. Yes, because you see that there was a particular incident in which one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people almost died if it weren't for the mother, Tzipora. Right. So the parents have the responsibility of ensuring that a bris happens. Now, let's be honest. Most parents do not know how to do this, so they find an agent, but it's their responsibility. Right? It's their responsibility to do it. And in fact, at a Bris Mila, the moel will turn to the dad who's right next to him and say, please be mamana mi ashliach, please give me agency to do this, and they're doing it on behalf of the parents. But let's say that they're failing that. So let's say that the parents are not doing their job. They did not, let's say they lived in a place where it was not allowed, or they weren't educated enough to be able to do this. Very common, unfortunately, in a lot of places throughout Jewish history. So what does one do in that situation? Upon whose shoulders does the responsibility fall? The answer is the community or based in. So that means to say that the community representative now takes on the responsibility where the parents aren't there. And by the way, this is true not just about Bris Mila, this is true about life in general. Unfortunately, at times where parents aren't doing their jobs. And so we can all look the other way and say, well, just too bad. Or we have to step in as a community and say, we have the responsibility of shouldering a little bit of that responsibility. That's the case over here. But let's say a person grows up, and at the time that they now emerge as an adult, a responsible, self-sustaining adult, and they see that they do not have a bris milah, and the community did not do its job, the parents did not do their job, then the responsibility falls upon that person's shoulders as an adult to take care of themselves as well. And many times this happens, if you go to certain communities, many people emerged out of the USSR, there were lots of people who came forward and had to organize and orchestrate their own bris milahs. They would come forward to do a bris milah in their 20s, in their 30s, to be able to do a bris milah, to really finally join the tribe. And that would be the responsibility. Failing to do so. What happens if a person fails to do so? So this is one of, as Abby mentioned last week, a mitzvah asay she yesh bo kares. It's one of the 2 mitzvahs asay, which if a person fails to do so, a person gets kares. When would that happen? Meaning, say, when is that red line crossed? So the Raavad would say that it's actually crossed every single day upon realization. So let's say a person comes out of the USSR, they're not educated. They go to a program. They go to a JSS, like as it happens, NYU's got a track for beginners. Wonderful, wonderful program. They go, then they suddenly realize, wait a second, Jews need to have circumcision. So at that point, the responsibility clicks in. The Raavad says every single moment that a person does not do what they need to, there is a chiyuv of kares. That's very serious. It's an ongoing, moment by moment responsibility. Whereas the Rambam says, no, the person only would incur kares if the person dies in such a state. Meaning to say, a person reaches the end of the line and did not perform what they needed to do as well. That also relates to the nature of Bris Mila. Is the nature of Bris Mila, just in terms of how we'll call it lomdus, in terms of the underpinnings of this halacha, is the mitzvah of Mila a mitzvah to do the Bris Mila or to be circumcised? And that is a little bit of the difference over here. The Rambam says it's the mitzvah to do, and you can only say a person didn't do it if they died without doing it. But if you say it's about being in a state of being nimol, that is a continuous state which is being absented when a person's not doing it as well. Yes, yeah.
2 points. One, the shul was very active in this years ago, where we used to go for the Russian kids and be sandiks for them, kids 13 or 14, 15 and older, that would listen, and they would refuse even anesthesia. It was very interesting, and we were very active in it in the shul. But also, the 8th day, if I recall correctly, I don't remember all the terms, but the essence of vitamin K, which is the clotting, reaches its peak on the 8th day, and then it settles to what it's going to be for the rest of life. So therefore, the 8th day is when it's most potent.
Fascinating. Thank you. Fantastic. I remember hearing something about that. That's fantastic. Now, again, these are all wonderful reasons. Ultimately, we do it because God says so, but it is amazing that a lot of these other ideas all coalesce together as well. Where should one make the bris? So the truth is that although it doesn't say it explicitly, that one should do it in a shul, but it seems very clear from the Shulchan Aruch whenever the Shulchan Aruch talks about it. When he talks about kvater and kvatrin as an example, it says going into the shul. It's taken as for granted. There were times during COVID that bris milas were made in houses just because of the nature of it, and sometimes there's a person who's housebound and cannot get out. That's understandable, but failing such,
You know, Rabbi, I remember before we had an Arab in the Five Towns community, and if it was Shabbos, you couldn't get the baby out.
For sure.
It'd have to be in
For sure. So Shabbos would be different. Shabbos, there's no way to do that, and then you bring the oil and the knife to the house, and that's it. But failing such, I'm saying if circumstances were not preventative, the shul is a place to be, and that's there's a lot of halachas that relate to the lights on in the shul, things like that relates to the Bris Mila as well.
So
Now,
what happens in those instances where there's no oil available and it's done as a matter of in a hospital? Many hospitals today.
Good question, Moshe. So
circumcision.
excellent. So many circumcisions are done in hospitals, even for non-Jewish children, just because it's seen as a matter of health. And so the question is, what happens if it's done in a hospital? Just a quick recap for those just don't understand how the Bris Mila works for just a quick second, because not everybody is medically aware of these things. So I remember when I think I must have been 8 years old. You know, that was my first time I said, I'm going to go see what's going on the stage, you know. And it wasn't such a pleasant experience. So they tell the kids to move away for a reason, right? So, but be as it may, there's always one kid, yeah. They're standing there staring. So it's not, that's not the place for the part, that's not for the video. So essentially, it's an amazing thing. Is that on the male genital, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, that there's a extra layer of skin over the top of it. And so that layer of skin, actually, what is done in the Bris Mila, there's no mutilation of any limbs here. What happens is that what the moil will do is he'll pull that layer of skin over the tip of the limb, hold it in place with what's called a mogain, which is a clamp. So he'll slide that foreskin, he'll pull it over. When the baby starts to cry, it's usually the cold, but what he'll do is he'll probe, he'll put an instrument in between the membrane and the limb itself, pull the membrane over the top. There's actually 2 layers of skin. That's what's called Mila and Priya. There's 2 stages. Pull it over, clamp it. So if you'll ever see, the moil has a little silver clamp, which has got like a line in the center. It'll clamp the skin in place so that the limb is separated from it. And immediately after saying the bracha, he'll slice it with a very far knife, and then the membrane will snap back, revealing the top of the limb. That's what the Bris Mila is. So it takes dexterity to be able to do this properly. In the hospitals, they do it slightly differently. So what do they do in the hospitals? Is they have a clamp. And the clamp is inserted between the membrane and the limb, right? So they insert it underneath the membrane, and then they tighten the clamp around the end of the foreskin. And what it'll do is it tightens in such a way that the skin itself is separated without even blood. It's separated in such a way that it pulls off the skin. They remove the clamp with the foreskin on it, and the baby is circumcised. That's the way they do it in the hospitals. Okay, so that being the case, just if the deficiency in such a process is number one, is it's usually done too early, because when is the baby in the hospital? Is usually within 3 days, 2 days. These days, 24 hours. I'm sure it'll be soon 6 hours. It's for the best of the mother and the child. We want to make sure they have bonding time. But anyways, that's what they told us when they took away the nursery for the last 2 children, right? Bonding time. So now it's done too early, but also another aspect of it, which is a problem, is it's bloodless. So you say, that's great. That's why they created it this way. So the problem is that there is an importance of there being blood, what's called hatofas dam bris, that there needs to be a flow of blood, and in fact that's seen as healthy in terms of the flow to avoid infection as well. And so that being the case, the problem with Bris Mila is it's the kind of thing you can only really do once. No second opportunities. So let's say a baby received a medical circumcision and it was too early, so they did not perform the mitzvah in the correct way, but the baby is circumcised, but being as it was not done correctly, then there needs to be what's called a tofas dam bris, which means to say that they apply a razor just on the area of the foreskin for a drop of blood to come out, and that is seen as to at least supplement the piece that was missing of that milah as well. So that's usually what's done. And this happens a lot of times when it happens to, let's say, you're dealing with a person who's coming for gerus and they were medically circumcised. So what do? So in that case, they'll do a hatavas dam bris with a moil, and that's sufficient, one drop of blood, and that would be sufficient to supplement the piece that was missing as well. That was done later on. Just to be aware of these things as well. There's all kinds of interesting things. I remember when they came up with a new type of clamp. They came up with a clamp. So the way it usually works with the moils is it's really just a small little. If you go to the moils table, you can see all these things. So they slide the mogain over, which is the shield, over. So they had a new one which like clamps over the top. It's got like a clip on the top to hold it in place. So I remember when I was learning Hilchos Mila with Rabbi Tendler, that's when I was first learning this. So he was very against it because he felt that it was more like the medical clamp was too good, that it would not allow sufficient bleeding as well. So he was very much against those things. Again, Rabbi Dr. Tendler used to train hundreds of moalim himself. It's just anyways, a lot to learn about. Now, yes, Alan.
I know the situation just recently where like a 30-something-year-old guy whose mother's not Jewish, father's Jewish, and he was going through gerus, and I was helping out, and I tracked down the moil, and the moil had actually, the father was Jewish, so he had a regular kosher bris, even though the baby was not Jewish because the mother's not Jewish.
Yep.
And the moil had his notes from 31 years ago, and in the notes the moil wrote l'shem gerus, and he noted that there were two from people in the room as far as Ada is concerned, and the psak was that he did not even have to blood drawn because the bris was done back then. So
Fantastic, yeah, and that's very. Thank God that somebody was on that page as well. I've had those situations as well, where it's very complicated. Like let's say you have a case of surrogacy, right, which is becoming more common, which is amazing. So let's say that a couple can't carry a child. So and the issue, let's say, lies on her side, so they can take the impregnated egg and actually put it into a surrogate mother who will carry the child. Who becomes the mother? It happens to be a matter of debate in halacha, which is a very fascinating, complicated thing. Is it birth mother? Is it a genetic mother? And being as that's the case, generally speaking, we do a gerus l'chumra in such a case. And in some cases, it's very hard for a couple, or usually the parents and the family. Like, how could you say that my child is not right, and so on. And so I've been at brisses where that's the case, where I take the moil aside and say, listen, we're doing this l'shem gerus, and appoint two other people, and then the based in signs that afterwards it's put in the documentation. Nobody ever knows about it, but that's the situation because of this. There's a lot that goes on. Because, by the way, what's the next set of halachas in Shulchan Aruch? Gerus. Gerus and Mila come together, and all the halachas of Gerus apply. I come here because the two are very much related. Now, basically, a more we'll call pedestrian question is for the men in the room. Do I keep my tefillin on? The Shach, the Sifsei Kohen says in the Shulchan Aruch, yes, men should keep their tefillin on, because the bris is considered an ois, a sign, and the tefillin are considered an ois, a sign as well, so they should be kept together. What is interesting, and I'll leave this for further thought, is why is that when it comes to Shabbos we don't duplicate ois, so we don't have tefillin on Shabbos, because we don't want the signs we don't need two signs, but when it comes to Bris Mila we do want two signs. I'm sure Moshe has a share on this, but this is an interesting discussion. Should we?
Shabbos is a good sign.
Oh, sorry, very good. So we have to go. You're right. Okay, good. Happens to be here. We're making the sign, but be as the may. So now, the question becomes is interesting. I noticed that in some Hasidic svarim, right, that one should take off the tefillin. Kabbalistically speaking, something going on over there. I don't know. Again, if the Shach says it and then a Kabbalistic source says something else, generally speaking, we follow the what's called nigle, the revealed halacha. But I would just make the following comment as well. If a person is going to be in a situation where the bris is not happening immediately, and so a person has their tefillin on, and they're going to just end up talking about everything and anything, that's a disgrace to the tefillin. It's a disgrace to the tefillin for a person to be speaking divrei chol when tefillin are on bichlal, not during davening, not before davening, or after davening. It's one's wearing the words of God on one's head and arm. It's a disgrace to be talking divrei chol. So if by keeping the tefillin on, one's going to involve oneself in that, then one should certainly take it off, because it's not doing no favor for the one's tefillin. So that would be the situation. If the bris is right away, and it's in a minute when one's not speaking, people not talking, and one's not solving all the world's issues after davening with one's tefillin on, then keep it on just for the sake of the bris as well. And if it's possible, and sometimes it's hard, if it's the Baalei bris, then keep it on if you're able to. But again, it's sometimes hard just because there's so many things going on. But there is a notion of the tefillin and the bris being connected. What are the honors at the bris? So if you have a great moil, the great moil will give this to you. He'll give you a sheet of all the kibudim. But it is worthwhile noting, let's do quickly blow by blow. There's what's called kvater and kvatrin. Kvater means kvater, meaning like the father, like the mother. Right, so these are the people who escort the baby into shul. It's usually seen as a kibbud, which is given. It's usually tried to be given to a young couple who doesn't have children yet, and it's seen as a segula for Be'ezrat Hashem for them to have children. One has to do this. One has to ask these kind of things sensitively, because they may be at a stage in their in their cycle where they can't hand things to one another. So one has to just be sensitive to these to these kind of things, because one puts people in difficult situations. But it's a very special thing. It doesn't have to be a couple who doesn't have children. It's a bracha to anybody to receive this, but that generally seems to be what people do. The next stage is the Kisei Shel Eliyahu, which is a special seat left empty in the shul that the baby's first put on. And then there's the sandek. The sandek holds the baby during the bris as well. It's worthwhile noting that you could slot in another one in there, which is called min ha-kisei, the person who picks up from the kisei shel Eliyahu and gives it to the sandek. Unnecessary, but if you need extra kibudim, that's where you can do it. Then after the sandek finishes, there could be another min ha-kisei, if you want to have another one. But then there's brachos, those are the blessings of the wine and the bris milah itself, which are said. And then there's amida la-brachos, the person holding the baby, facing the person saying the brachos. Then there's a kriyas shem, giving the name to the baby, and the person holding for kriyas shem. If you count all those together, we have 8/10, depending if you take those two picking up the babies from the chair as well, in terms of people that can be honored. Kvatrin can also be broken up as well, meaning to say it is possible that you could have, as an example, and I'm not suggesting this for anybody, but let's say that there's two couples, right? It could be woman to woman, man to man. It is possible to do that kind of chain as well. And obviously depending on time and the needs, that's sort of extendable a little bit in that respect. So let's go through them quickly. What is the Kisei Shel Eliyahu? So the Avud Raham explains that the Kisei Shel Eliyahu is put at the bris because if you read Melachim Aleph Perek Yud Ches, when Eliyahu Navi has just declared a famine on the earth for 3 years, and then it has a showdown at Har Carmel. The next day, he's got his head on a wanted poster because of Izebel, and he runs to the cave in. Where does he hide? Har Sinai. He goes to the Sinai Peninsula, where Moshe Rabbeinu was on Sinai, and Akash Baruch Hu speaks to him. He says, "Kanoi kinesi, I'm zealously searching out your honor, God, because the Bnei Yisrael do not keep the covenant." And it's understood that the covenant doesn't just mean to say the covenant is doing the mitzvahs. It means actually Bris Mila is castigating the northern kingdom of Israel of not adhering to the uniqueness and their calling in the world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu famously sends the wind and the fire and the noise. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not found in these very powerful acts of zealotry. And Eliyahu seems to keep repeating this. And so Avud Raham quotes the Medrash in which Eliyahu is therefore mandated to attend every single Bris Mila. Why? To prove to him that throughout the course of history, that the nation of Israel will keep the Bris Mila, and you will be there to watch, and you are the Malach HaBris. You're going to be the escort to every Bris in order to verify and ratify this. It reminds me of a beautiful story told by Rabbi Riskin. Rabbi Riskin wrote a beautiful autobiography, which is it's just very special. And he describes how when he used to go to the USSR on trips to help out Russian Jewry, he describes one time that a fellow comes to him and says, Rabbi, we're going to go. I'm doing a bris milah of my son. Can you come with me? So he says, absolutely, with pleasure. He says, but we're doing it at 2:00 in the graveyard, because that was the only place that the KGB might not suspect, and there's no cameras. So he says, I'm happy to come, but remember, I'm a Kohen, so I can't go into the graveyard. So I'm happy to come. So they go there, and he arrives at 2 o'clock in the morning. They go through the alleyways and they come to the graveyard, and the moel and the father go in, and the baby cries, and they come out, and they give him a name, and Rav Riskin turns to him and says, "Keshem shenichnas labris, ken yikonas ator lechupa lamazim tovi." And the father says, "Niet keshem." So he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "I don't want it to be that my child will have to get married, hiding in a graveyard, pretending not to be Jewish. I want it to be niet kashem." And Rav Riskin famously, and this is how every chapter sort of ends, is this way. And he says, "And I made the wedding for that boy 20 years later in Yerushalayim." So as it goes, as the whole full circle goes. But nonetheless, very beautiful, beautiful story. But if you think about it, you know what? Eliyahu was there too, to say, you know what? In the graveyard at 2 o'clock in the morning under the USSR, we're still doing it. That's the Malach HaBris of Eliyahu Hanavi. So put things in perspective. Sandek is seen as a very special. It's the highest kibbud over here, which obviously means to say the highest amount of tension. Why is it seen as the highest kibbud? The Shulchan Aruch describes, quoting the Maharil, who explains that it is seen as a person, as the Kohen is maktir katoris. It's seen as a sacrificial act. In fact, if you look at the Bir Agra and the Shulchan Aruch throughout the halachas of Mila, you'll see the Vilna Gaon time after time after time will equate the Bris Mila to an act of a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. Obviously, there is an element of sacrifice and a sharp knife and blood, right? But if you think about it from the perspective of parents, it's very sacrificial. This is the time we want to be in the house, nobody touching our baby, nobody doing anything. There we go. We hand over this child to some fellow who in public is going to be doing all these kind of things to our children. It's a very unnatural experience, and it's seen as very much sacrificial. And in a certain sense, the Sandek is seen as the Kohen who's, so to speak, holding or facilitating that. And the bringing of Ketores is seen as something which is associated with great segulas for wealth, and also bracha in general, which is why Charoshim Ketores, the Gemara tells us that the same Kohen could not perform the Ketores another time in their entire lifetime. The Kohen would only get this one time in their lifetime to be able to have the privilege of bringing the Ketores, which is why in Halacha, a person should not be the Sandek twice within the same family. Within the same family as well, it should not be the same Sandek as a function of this. It can be the same Sandek for cousins, but not siblings, as I said. What are the brachas which are said? So there are two brachas that are right around the milah itself. One is Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvah tzivanu al hamila, which is the Hashem, you command us to do the milah. That is said by the mohel. He says that immediately before. So just in case, if you ever want to be at the next bris and take a look at how this works, you will say that when the mohel says this bracha, you'll notice he's holding the knife right by the clamp, right by the margain, the shield. And the minute he finishes, he slices down. When he's finished that bracha, the brin is done. It's finished. It's immediate. Then comes the father and says, that you allow us to bring us into the covenant of Abraham. That's said already when the bris happens. Okay, the bris is already finished before the father starts that bracha. But you just understand the speed of things over here. All the work is done before, till the point that it's done before. The question that's asked is, wait a second, how could you say a bracha after the act? Usually you have to say all the brachas before you do it. So there's many answers which are given. One is simply not possible to do both before. But another answer is that the second bracha is more of what's called a birkas hashevach, where we're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the possibility and opportunity of having this rather than for being in a state of being nimel, rather than the mitzvah of actually doing it as well, which is why it's said afterwards, like we say a bracha on lightning, after we see the lightning, not before the lightning happens. As an example. Then, what is the responsibility of the assembled crowd? So the first thing is just to keep quiet. It's amazing how many brises you have to remind people that we're not here to see each other. But nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch tells us that everybody should be standing. Now you think you're standing at the end of shul, right? But really one should be standing because there's a mitzvah being performed. And there's a certain element of respect that is shown by standing around. But also, when they hear the father make their bracha, they respond with the following statement. This statement changes depending on if you are an Ashkenazi or from the Edut Mizrach. The Ashkenazim have the tradition to say, "Keshem shenichnas labris kenikonis laTorah lechupa lamasim tovim." As this child has become a Jew by entering into this covenant, he should enter into all other important stages of life. Good. However, the Sfardim have a different text, which is based on actually a Tosos at the end of Rebbe Mila Kuf Lamed Vav, and also based on the Rambam's Nusach, which is Keshem Shehichnastoi Lebris Ken Tizker Lachniso LeTorah LeMitzvot LeChupa LeMasim Tovim. And what is the difference in that language? What is that referring to then?
Bracha on the father.
Good. The bracha is on the parents, which means to say, as opposed to the Ashkenazim who are blessing the child. Just as this child entered bris, he should enter the Torah, l'chuppah, l'masim tovim, this child should be blessed. But when it comes to the Sephardic idea, it is a blessing to the parents. Like you had the privilege of bringing this child to the bris, you should have the privilege of escorting them to all these important stages in life as well. Very beautiful blessing, and especially for grandparents to hear that. That's a very special bracha to be had. We should all be healthy enough to be able to do that in the next stage as well. So that's the shift of who we'll call the object of the bracha is when said it should be noted as well. Be it as it may. Now, an important question is there the bracha of Shehechiyano? And the truth is, it depends again on Nusach. Among the Sfardim, yes. So the Sfardim, you'll notice, this is, the Ashkenazim usually interrupt the father at this point, because the father will say, and everybody says, Kish, and then they'll say, Shh, it's amazing we reach this point. What is special privilege? The Ashkenazim don't. Why don't we do it? So there's many reasons given. The main reason is because the child's crying. On the one hand, it's a very special moment in life for you, dad, mom, but the baby's crying. So we're not going to. The bracha is pulled away at that point. Now we don't talk about the Shehechiyano as well. There's after everything is said and done, there's another two brachas. One is on the geffen. You'll notice that one appears at every meridian in life where we're moving between what's called kodesh and chol, but already chol and kodesh. Anytime we're trying to separate what could be a mundane activity from a spiritual activity, where there's spirituality infused in a physical experience, the wine appears. So Shabbos is bookended by wine, right? We sort of say this could be a regular Saturday where we just drive around like we do and just check our phones all day long. But now instead, this is a unique space, so we distinguish it by wine on either side. Whereas when it comes to, as an example, wedding, right? So this could be this could just be the beginning of a physical relationship between two mammals. Or this could be something divine. This could be the moment where now there's going to be the Shechina Shruya B'neihem, and we distinguish that by saying there's a bracha on wine. Now we have a child who's entering into Rishon Shavrim, and this could just be another child running around the world, but no, we've given a sign, a uniqueness to this child. This child should be special. There's holiness imbued in this process as well. There's wine. Once again, wine is obviously that thing in the world which does not deteriorate with age, but improves with age, which has a spiritual quality to it as well. Then it's followed by a bracha, which is Asher Kiddush Yedin Betin Chod B'Sher Asom V'Tzetzav Chasam V'Esbris Kodesh Al Kem Yischar Zos Kel Chai Kel Ken Yitzorenu Tzavei La'atzil Yedidus Sheri Mishachas Le'man Bris Asher Asom V'Sorenu. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you for allowing us to give the bris milah to this child, which is going to be a salvation factor for this child. This child will be saved as a function of having this bris, and then the bracha is finished. There's a debate as to when the wine is drunk, as to whether you wait until after the Kriyas Hashem or not, because the Kriyas Hashem is not part of the bracha. Rav Shecht, I noticed, would drink immediately right afterwards and then fill the cup again for the Kriyas Hashem. That's the way that he would do it. And then we have the Kriyas Hashem. Why is there the name calling at the bris? And it seems to be that this child is now becoming a card-carrying member of Klal Yisrael, so you give him an address now, right? So now he has a spiritual address. Before now, not so simple. If, let's say, a baby is going to have to wait a while before the Bris Mila, there are times where one would do the Kriyas Hashem earlier, depending on the circumstances, so you can daven for the child. We shouldn't have to be in such situations. But be as it may, it's usually accompanying the Bris, all things going well, the sun shining. And that's when the name is actually given. There's a lot of brachas which are given in that as well, quoting the pasuk in Yechezkel, which we quote in the Agada, which is in the middle of the Kriyas Hashem. We say, "Va'avar alayich v'arech misposeses b'domayich, v'amalach b'domayich, chayi b'domayich, chayi." You live in your blood. You live in your blood. That refers to two sets of blood, which is the Bris Mila and the Korban Pesach, two sets of sacrifice, one nationalistically becoming unique and one individualistically becoming unique, and through those sets of blood, both on a national and individual level, we become special. And there's a few brachas which are added in here as well. And then everybody says Kashem Shenichnas the Bris again. Very, very, very beautiful. I will leave as a question just for further thought. In this section of the Kriyas Hashem, you'll notice that when it describes the patriarchs, it says Asher Koras is Avraham Ushuasa leYitzchak v'Yamidel Yaakov leChoik. It quotes Yitzchak with a sin, and the question is why? It's quoting a pasuk. pasuk which differs between Tehillim and Divrei Yamim. But why would it be that's Yitzchak as opposed to Yitzchak, as quoted in this? That's not a bris related, but it is a interesting question for further thought as well. How does the ceremony end? The ceremony ends with Aleinu. Most people don't know that because they're already talking. But the bris actually ends with an Aleinu. Everybody does the Aleinu together. Why is the Aleinu done? Aleinu is usually done at the end of a process of tefillah. So like for instance, every davening ends with an Aleinu. Kiddush Levana is seen as very special because it ends with an Aleinu. And a bris ends with an Aleinu. Why would there be an Aleinu? One reason I saw that is quoted, the Avod Raham explains, is because in it we say Shaloi Samanu Mishpuchas Adamah, Lo Samachakenu Kohen V'Garelenu Kol Hamanom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you did not make us like the regular Gentiles. This is the moment where this child can now say that. So at this point in time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you for making us unique. By the way, Aleinu starts particularistic and ends universalistic. Al-Kain is much more universal. The beginning is particularistic, and that's the aspect that we're trying to imbue when relating to this child as well. Who should get invited to the meal afterwards? The answer is no one. You're not supposed to invite people to a bris meal because there's a curse associated with not attending a bris Mila when you to a bris meal. This particular surah as well. So it can be announced. You can say there is a meal downstairs, but one should not say everybody is welcome to join for the meal, because if a person does not do that, that's not such a good thing as well. So people should absolutely go, and there should be a minyan at the meal, and there should be a zimun at the end, and in order to facilitate all the brachas which go then. But one shouldn't specifically, one should not specifically invite as well. And it is important at the meal for a few things to happen, because it is a sudas mitzvah. So first of all, then you should also have a Dvar Torah. So yes, there's thank yous, and the reason for the name, those are fantastic. There should also be a Dvar Torah. And so if the father doesn't feel comfortable, somebody else should say a Dvar Torah. There should be a Dvar Torah at the meal as well. And in addition to this, there is also, one should really wash hands, say Birkas Hamazon, because at the Birkas Hamazon there is a very special zimun, which is unique to a bris milah. It's found in the Sidurim, and it includes everybody. Is the phrase which keeps as the refrain in the zimun. And additionally, there are 6 harachamans added at the end of the bris, which are harachamans to the child, to the moel, to the parents, and in general, very beautiful harachmans which are gone around, and there's a zimun which is done on a kois. It's a very, very beautiful experience when done properly, and Be'ezra Hashem is a schus for all of us. What happens if the milah is done on Shabbos? So that's an entire section in Shulchan Aruch, a very, very complicated halachas. But as Suri says, I think the way you pointed out before is perfect. Is anything which is ancillary to the bris needs to be done beforehand, and anything necessary for the bris is done on Shabbos. So a bris is allowed to be done on Shabbos, even though you're not usually not allowed to make incisions on Shabbos. One does, because the Torah tells us that even on Shabbos, the Gemara tells us, but anything which is unnecessary to be done on Shabbos. So for instance, bringing the knife, preparing the knife, all those things, all the necessary work that needs to be done beforehand is done before Shabbos as well. This actually was a matter of debate, because Rabbi Eliezer felt that was not true. He felt that afilo machshirei mila doichenes Shabbos, that even Rabbi Eliezer would feel in the town of Rabbi Eliezer, they would actually cut the trees on Shabbos to get the wood, to burn to create the fire, to smelt the metal, to create the knife on Shabbos. That's how far he would go, meaning to say the entire process was Doicha Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer was, so to speak, voted out of halacha. It does not exist as an opinion in halacha, but it's worthwhile knowing in his town until the halacha was normalized, was not such. But today we follow that machshirei milah do not Doicha Shabbos. That's carrying the knife, preparing, and so on. That there is no other alternative in halacha today. It's just fascinating. This is part of the process of halachic formation at the times of the Tanaim. And today, therefore, all the other details are done. I'll tell you a little. I'll end with a story. My bris milah was on Shabbos. It's a little hazy. I don't remember specifically. But my first son's bris milah was also on Shabbos as well. In fact, the sundek at my bris happened to be in Manhattan. I had my bris in Cambridge. That's where my parents were living in England, and it happened to be my sundek happened to be in Manhattan the day that my son was having his bris. And guess guess who came in to be part of the Bris was my Sunday. There was still happened to be just beautiful. So it's on Shabbos, and our moil was Pinchas Katzenstein of the entire Katzenstein dynasty in Washington Heights. We actually knocked on his door on Shabbos afternoon when I came back from Columbia to make sure that the next Shabbos he would, put a booking because it's very hard to catch moils, especially on Shabbos. But nonetheless, so he brings his whole attaché briefcase and he puts it into the closet because that's where the knife is supposed to be. And remember, on that side of Washington Heights, I don't hold the area of the other side. Anyway, so it doesn't make. So the knife is there in the YU based medrash, and comes Shabbos morning, and I run to the closet to pick up the thing. He says, "Stop!" So he says, "The knife is muktzah to you. It's only allowed for me, meaning I have the job to do the milah." Right, that's that, but it's not for you, anyways. The specificity and the details when it comes to Shabbos are all these a lot of very interesting requirements, folks. I hope there's a little bit of an overview. There's so much more to learn, but this is just a sort of a general overview. Be'ezras Hashem, I hope it enriches and our lives, and Be'ezras Hashem we should be able opportunity of doing this many times soon.